Welcome to the Startup Grind.
My name is Tony Polizzi. I'm the director of Startup Grind Denver. I have my helpers and helping folks out here as well that I want to recognize. Colleen Cosme here in the middle here, and David Jennings. I don't know where David is, over there. And then some of the folks here from Warren Tech who are doing the video and the audio. I'd like to thank those folks for being here. And of course, Denise, thank you so much, as well as folks from Convercent. So real quick, just a couple of items here, housekeeping items. Just real quick, how many people here know what Startup Grind is all about? Just raise your hand. Okay, there's a few of you. So those of you who don't know and who just learned, you can look to the person who didn't raise their hand and you can tell them what it's all about. It's a group that is sponsored by Google for Entrepreneurs, and there's a couple other sponsors that we have as well, like Microsoft does some stuff, and Kauffman Foundation is engaged recently. But we're really here to kind of to inspire and educate and connect people in the entrepreneur world, or people that are interested in it, that are interested in either starting up or have some sense of startup drive, if you will, or passion. But also just kind of work with folks that have gone through some of this stuff and learn from their stories as individuals, and how they got through it. And we tape them, obviously, and then we put them up on our site and promote them both on startupgrind.com and for the Denver one. So we're here to create community and to inspire the passion, if you will, when it comes to the startup world. As you know, if you haven't gone to the site, you saw some of the other folks that are coming up in the coming months. We have Mark Geeney from Cloud Elements next month, and then in May, we have a special event with Claudia Batten from Broadly. And that month is Google Entrepreneurs 40 Forward Women Entrepreneur Month. So we're happy to have Claudia. And then we have some folks scheduled for June, July, which will come up in August, September going forward. So plan on at least, there's one every month, and plan on the second Thursday of the month. So we can talk about stuff later. If you have some questions about Startup Grind or anything else afterwards, you can ask myself or Colleen or David or whoever. So, so really tonight we're here to interview Patrick Quinlan from Convercent, and I'm just going to read a little bit about Patrick here, and that we have a tradition here at Startup Grind that I want everybody to know. So once I get done with this and I introduce Patrick, we all have to stand up and scream and holler. Okay, and I mean it, because if you don't, then you're in trouble. So, okay. So anyways, Patrick's had a pretty long history when it comes to entrepreneurship and starting up and running companies. From the time he was at Delta, he kind of brought it from very low revenue to very high revenue, and sold that company off. And then he was over at Rivet for a while, and brought that from low revenues per quarter and to high revenues, and from about 20 employees to about 650, 1,500 customers, et cetera. And at that point, they were ranked at number 60 on the Inc. List of top companies. And in 2011, he was actually awarded from Ernst Young Entrepreneurial Leadership Award for under 40 for a CEO. So he's here tonight, and we really appreciate him being part of this. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Patrick Quinlan. Woo! Well, it's just easier for the tape thing, so.
Everybody, this is Jasmine. She comes absolutely everywhere with me, so it's just, she's a shadow.
She's a shadow? That's okay. Cool. All right, well, welcome. Thank you very much for showing up tonight. So first I want to start out this with a little bit about your background, kind of where you grew up, what were some of the things that were interesting to you when you were a kid, kind of a story up until, take us up to about college.
Which time?
That's up to you.
So abbreviated kind of version, I was born and raised in Germany. My mom's German, my father's American. I was born in a little town called Augsburg, which is outside of Munich. Was raised by a very kind of conservative small-town German mom, and my father is an Army officer, by the way, of a pretty storied childhood, bouncing around a lot. So two very different parents. And interestingly, I was just sharing this with somebody, my dad didn't speak German, my mom didn't speak English. And they got married pretty quick, and I came pretty quick, so they were still learning each other's language literally when I was born. And so I bounced around a lot. I moved 14 times before high school. I lived in 3 different countries, went across the ocean about 5 times. The longest I ever lived anywhere was 22 months. So I got very comfortable being in new places and having new experiences. But probably one of the most important experiences of my life was my first day of high school. I went to GW High School here in Denver. And so you have to picture this is 1985. The inner city of Denver had experienced a pretty dramatic white flight. The public schools in Denver were really not all that good. And the GW had an IB program, so it had an extraordinary educational program inside the school. It was about 70% African American. And of the 30% it was pretty much just African American and white. And of the 30% that was white, it was probably about 80% Jewish. So I have seen in my sum total of my life, probably 100 black people in my life. And I walk into GW on the first day, and it is, completely 70% African American. And I had seen very little economic differences in my life, so I kind of grew up in this very little German world. And so to walk into GW on the first day, this is, Public Enemy had just released Fear of a Black Planet. This was just a world unlike anything I'd ever experienced. And then if you kind of follow the Jewish holiday calendar, 2 weeks later, it's Yom Kippur. So now it's literally my sister, Kai Belk, who's still a deal friend, and I are the only white folks in school. And I grew up more in that 4 months of that first semester of my freshman year. What I learned about life, what I learned about dealing with people who didn't view the world the same way as I did at this little, German kid, was an extraordinary experience. And I think what success I have achieved in life, I think I tie back to that moment and how that caused me to view the world differently more than anything else. I went to CU for my freshman year, and I got a 0.0. So college was not for me. I ended up in the Army, served in Desert Storm, which is probably the second most pivotal experience in my life.
And thank you for your service for that. Thank you so much.
I had no options. I didn't volunteer out of patriotism. My dad was going to kill me, so it was survival.
It was survival.
Yeah, so,
okay. Well, thank you again.
And so, being in the military, I kind of figured out that maybe I wanted to give college a try. So I graduated from the University of Kansas, Rock Chalk Jayhawk, OKU. It's that time of year that it's very great to be from Kansas. And so graduated college and knew that I had to get a job. I was getting married. I actually got married right after graduation. So I was 26. So I got a job here in Denver, and it was the 3rd day of the job, and I was a junior salesperson. And the CEO and I got into a conversation. I kind of told him, God, a couple things you're doing don't really make sense to me. And I guess I didn't ask the question right, so he fired me. So I get home and I'm sitting on the couch, and my wife Elizabeth walks in, and she looks at me and she's like, "You got fired." And I was like, "How do you know that?" And he's like, "How do you know by just looking at me that I got fired? Because nobody gets fired on their 3rd day." and she's like, it was 2 in the afternoon, so that was the giveaway. So I ended up, it was probably the 3rd most important pivotal thing that happened to me. And I ended up, through a friend, getting a job counting words at a translation company in Denver. And so this was 1996, so the whole interwebs thing was brand new. And it was my first email address when I got there. I was so excited. And so I walk in, and he's like, "Listen, we're not hiring, but I need this word thing, so will you do it?" And I said, "Well, yeah, of course, because I don't have any money." And so he said, "Well, great, we'll get you set up." So I'm assuming there's some system to do this. So they put these binders on the desk, and it was an operations manual to a GE steam turbine. It was literally stacked up this high. And he's like, "So we need to know how many words are in there." And I was like, "Cool, what's the system?" And he's like, "Open the page." So there
1, 2, 3.
And I'm laughing because Barclay Friesen, who's one of my dearest friends in the world, he and I have worked together for 10 years, knows my attention span is about 14 seconds. So it took me literally 12 weeks to count them. It's about 4 million words. So I got hired into the company. My starting salary was $28,000. I was so excited. And I knew that it was an easy goal. I just had to make it 4 days, right? Because that was a 25% improvement on my last job. And so I ended up the third assistant. Like, there was this project, a big project in Argentina. It was one of the biggest translation projects in the world. It was translating that 4 million words of this very complex English into Spanish for an Argentinian power plant that GE was building. And the guy that got hired, who was running the project, was an MBA from DU. He was a finance guy, and they gave him this $1.5 million project and said, go manage it, and here's your couple of assistants. And he got fired about October. And he got fired because we had hired a subcontractor in Argentina to do a bunch of the work. And that subcontractor, they were very Argentinian, and this MBA from DU was very MBA from DU, and it just didn't work. So when he got fired, the next guy, who's been there for a couple of years, it was his turn. So he gets the job, and he also had an MBA. And he tries to take an MBA approach to solving this problem. And he lasts about 2 months, and he gets fired. So it's the Friday before Thanksgiving. He gets fired, and the guy who owns the company who hired me to count the words came in, and he literally looked at me. His name's Tim Jenkins. He looked at me, he said, "You're up." I was like, "Let's do it." And he said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to go to Argentina." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, everybody's on the phone with these guys in Argentina, and I don't think it's working." He's like, "Oh, do you speak Spanish?" I'm like, "Not a word." And he said, "Okay, well, when are you going to leave?" I said, "I'll leave tomorrow." And he said, "Well, Thanksgiving's next week." And I said, "Well, not in Argentina. Like pilgrims came here, they didn't go there." And
I understand what that means.
so I went home and I told my wife that, sorry, I'm not going to be here for our first Thanksgiving event on the airplane. So I took $5,000, I got on the airplane, I flew down there. And it was like my first day at GW again. I got off the airplane, didn't speak any Spanish, had never been to Argentina. But I grew up in the world, and I realized that at the end of the day, it's about relationships. And these group of Argentinians saw a bunch of gringos on the phone up in Argentina, and they saw it as an opportunity to suck every dry dollar that they could out of them, because that was the thinking. And there wasn't a relationship, and if there's not a relationship, that's how it works in Argentina. That's how it works in South America. And so I ended up falling head over heels in love with Argentina. I spent about 18 months there. I was 27 years old. It was the best 18 months of my life. And we got the project done. It was successful. I ended up becoming the president of the company. And later we sold that company, and that was kind of the beginning of my entrepreneurial career. But what I guess I take away from that kind of long-winded story is at the end of the day that we hear so much about big data and so much about the numbers, and there's whole investment groups out there. If you follow Brad Feld and the team at Foundry, I mean, everything that they focus on in many of their investment theories is around how much do they drill into the tiny little minutia of the details. And obviously that's extraordinarily successful in building a company, but the thing that you can't forget at the end of the day, no matter how much it is about e-commerce, no matter how much it is about computers, it's actually still about people. And that's what I spend the vast majority of my time and energy on. And I just never, I always think about that first day at GW or getting off the airplane in Rosario, Argentina, and that's why I'm here, because of those pivotal moments and experiences. So
cool.
That's my viewpoint on building business.
Your viewpoint on building business. Well, you had said to me the other day that building a business is hard. And and one of the things that in kind of researching yourself and is you had done an interview a while back. I guess it was probably back in 2008, maybe 2009, where you said you just don't quit. You had some experiences with the ups and downs, right? Making things successful, some things were successful, and that kind of thing. So you had done an interview talking about how you came over some adversity. There were some things that happened, it crashed, and you said, all right, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to just get myself back up, and I'm going to start doing something. You want to kind of explain a little bit about that?
Well, I say that Barclay and I have been through a lot together. This is a little insight in that. So this is the shredded truck story for a couple of you. I think I've maybe heard this one. So I get really twitchy when I see shredded trucks, like really twitchy. And we were actually in a meeting, Barclay and I were in a meeting downstairs, and a shredded truck pulled up outside the conference room, and we almost started hugging each other. We got so nervous. So Barclay and I got hired at a company. This was in 2002? Yeah. 2002. We met. He was a vendor. I was on the other side. He ended up coming over to the company. There were about 30 employees. We had raised about $4 or $5 million. I was the chief of staff. He came on as a project manager. Turned out the CEO literally had stolen money, like literally like wrote himself a check out of the account. So the investors, who were a bunch of high net worth individuals from Denver, folks who were literally the founders of the cable industry, some pretty well known, very successful first generation business folks from Denver, had put this money in $500,000 checks at a time. And so there was still some money in the bank. They hired the president of Koch Industries and a associate of his to come in and kind of look at the whole business and essentially figure out how they were going to shut it down and how much money could we pull out of the money we had put in. So they come in, they interview everybody in the company, and at some point they get to Barclay and I, and they interview us individually. And I don't know, we must have told them, we think there's something here, don't give up, you know, we can figure this out. So they ended up literally letting everybody go but Barclay and I. So we were, you know, chief cook and bottle washer, the two of us. And there wasn't really much of a business model, but we kind of put some stuff together, and over the next 6 years, we built a company that did $12 million in revenue. We had about 90 employees. We had offices in Denver, Austin, Dallas, and San Antonio. Almost all of our revenue came out of Texas. We were in the home building space. Our clients were the kind of top 10 home builders. We would contract with them, and then they would sub work to us, and we would sell things to them and to their homeowners. Everything was going great. We raised some money from some VCs. The investors were pleased because the valuation was, you know, above what they had put it in, and there was this view that they were going to get their money back. And so it was July of 2008, and we signed a term sheet with Ultimate Electronics to essentially, they were going to sell a division of their company. We were going to merge it with ours. We were going to create this new company. We were going to be about a 20 million revenue company. We were going to be the largest structured wiring company in the United States. And it was going to be a big win. Barclay and I would have realized some gain from that. I had, toward the end, put about $150,000 on my credit cards. But you know, everything was going to work out. So we were scheduled to close in the fall. It got pushed back a couple times. And so we were scheduled to close on a Wednesday. And that Monday, Lehman collapsed. And so literally on Wednesday, there was a gentleman who's in the middle kind of putting the deal in, that morning walked in and said, deal's off, it's not happening. And it was final, it was not happening. And so Barclay and I had spent, you know, 12 or 18 months holding this company together with these 90 employees, and we had created an extraordinary culture. We had gotten everybody to buy into our vision. We knew everybody's families, we knew their kids. I mean, this was the Brady Bunch. And we couldn't make payroll on Friday. Gig was up because, you know, as you get ready to an acquisition, you start to drain cash. I mean, there's things you do, which I would never do again, but didn't know that at the time. And you know, literally the world was falling apart around us. I mean, if you can think back to that October, you know, nobody knew what was going to happen in December. And so deal was off, and we, on Thursday, had to gather everybody together in Denver and say, there were probably like 10 of us, 12 of us in Denver, and tell them, you know, I can't, no, we could pay you on Friday. We actually could make payroll on Friday, but we couldn't pay you the starting Monday. So we were paying you for the 2 weeks you had worked. But we said, that's it, it's up. We had to get on speakerphone and tell people in Texas. And so we told everybody on Thursday, or maybe it was that Wednesday afternoon, and the next morning we come back in because, you know, we've got this office with all these customer social security numbers and all this stuff. So we knew we had to come in and like do something, like, right, like close it up. Come in, everybody comes to work. And we're like, you don't understand, like, it's over. I mean, they kept coming back. We're like, we can't pay you. And so we, through the help of a woman who actually works for us today, which is something I'm extraordinarily proud of, Kara Anderson. Kara Anderson said, we gotta, you know, get rid of everything. She goes, let's put it on Craigslist. So mind you, I mean, we've lost everything, right? And we put on Craigslist free. And I am not shitting you. You want to get rid of stuff? The office was wiped out. 15 minutes, it was empty. There was nothing but trash cans and filing cabinets. And a shredded truck pulled up, and it was, how many trash cans was it?
The doomed shredded truck.
18 trash cans, full trash cans full of all of our contracts, everything we had built. And they wiped it out in how many minutes?
No, it was like maybe 15 minutes.
15 minutes, gone.
15 minutes.
And I literally, Jasmine and I walked home from the office, and I was walking home, and you know, I didn't have a paycheck. I had 150 grand on my credit cards. I mean, I lost everything. And I still had a wine cellar downstairs, and so I spent like October, November kind of drinking wine in my basement. And it's not glorious. I mean, this isn't one of those moments where like the music comes on and you start doing push-ups like Rocky. And, no, you just like sit in your basement and drink. And you know, what I had at that time was my family and my friends, and Barclay and I fortunately had a very close relationship that we didn't eat each other through that process. He went through some very difficult stuff that, you know, both of us financially were in a tough place. Barclay was married with kids, and I know, you know, Jen and the kids really well, and I mean, it was brutal. And so Barclay moved back to North Carolina to be with his family. And as if it couldn't get worse, I actually got sued by Honeywell for $775,000 for a personal guarantee I'd signed. And all through that, you know, I didn't know what I was going to do. And it was a couple days before Christmas. I was like, I have to get a job. I have to like stop drinking the wine because I'm almost out. And so I get a job as an assistant. So I've been a CEO twice. It's 2009. I have nothing but my house. I got to feed the dog, and so I get a job as a junior salesperson at a little consulting firm in Denver, Colorado called Aero Electronics. So I walk in the first day, and you know, my base salary is $36,000. I mean, you've hit rock bottom. Again, there's no music, there's no push-ups. Like, you just walk in the door. And I walked in, and I met a couple people that day. And one of the people I met was a guy named Philip Winterburn, big 6'7" English guy with an accent. And I started selling and picking up the phone, just dialing. So this is 2009, this isn't that long ago. And January 1st, and so it's probably 4 months later, Philip calls me, he's like, hey, I got a sales opportunity for you. There's this guy who wants to talk to you about building a sales program at the company. And Philip and I had started to develop a pretty good friendship. Barclay was still back in North Carolina. And so I get invited into a company. We get a consulting gig to build a sales team over 90 days. That was in June. And so Philip helps out, and I get hired. Then it goes from a contract gig to I get hired to be the president of that company in September. And that was the company we built from 1 million to 60 million in 24 months. And we grew from 20 to 700 employees. And it was incredible, but the thing that was most exciting about that was I used as one of my references, obviously, Barclay. So the guys, you know, this is when I'm the consultant, so he calls up and he calls up Barclay, and Barclay's like, oh no, it's going to work out great, you should really hire the guy. And he's like, do you want a job here? He's like, well, yeah, I actually kind of do. So Barclay came back, and we ended up hiring Philip, and that kind of put the team together. And we built a great company. It was something we were extraordinarily proud of. And then that led to where we are today, and you know, we're all business partners, and we've found a fourth in Chuck Boyle. But the thing that's most important about that story is that Kara Anderson, who worked for me at ServiceSelect, worked for us at Rivet. She actually ended up leaving Rivet because she had a great opportunity to go somewhere else and get a real promotion. And every day she actually sits right behind me, and you know, she's known Jasmine since she was a puppy. And it's one of those things that I take immense pride in, because through success and failure, it's what you do during those moments, you know, that really defines you as a person. And it's easy to be a hero when things are going right and you know, wave from the car in the parade. But it's much harder. What do you do in those moments where you hit rock bottom? And you know, Barclay and I are still the dearest of friends, and we will be for life. And that is the part of business that, you know, not everybody agrees with that. You know, some people view it as just the numbers. I think there's a kind of in between, and I think the technology communities embrace that better than most. That, you know, there is still a form of doing it for a cause and a reason. So
cool. So when you were at that stage, you had mentioned that there was this energy in you. Can you kind of give us a little bit more sense of, you know, where that came from? Was it just internal? Was it something external, being from some other people that you met during your lifetime?
No, there really isn't a great story. Like, there's no Rocky music. I was completely out of line. I'm very close to my siblings. I'm the oldest. My sister's younger than me. My sister totally has her shit together. Like, graduated college in 4 years, met a guy, got married, 2 great kids, has like a huge savings account. And I was borrowing money from my sister to pay my mortgage, and I was tired of her giving me shit.
So she was your inspiration.
That was when I stopped drinking and went back and got a job. So it isn't, you know, there aren't those moments of you know, like I said, the Rocky music. You just run out of options.
And
Kind of like when I joined the Army.
so that was it, right? Okay, cool. The other thing I was going to ask you is kind of playing on that same theme is you talked several times, you mentioned about a relationship, you mentioned culture, you mentioned, going out and finding the right people and getting the right people around you. What are some of the key characteristics that you've experienced so far when it comes to finding the right people? And once you find them, how do you, and how have you at this point, molded that culture, if you will, or kind of created that?
So I make real gut decisions, and they're right about 80% of the time. I make gut decisions on really huge things, and I make gut decisions on really small things. And so, I don't know, I think 70-80% of the time they're right. And when I meet people, so one of the rules that we've developed as an executive team over the years at the different companies is we hire fast and we fire fast. And we make that very clear to everybody. Like, when you come in, if this works, you're going to be on the team, and we love you, and it's going to be great. And if it doesn't work, like, you don't. And we're not going to lose any sleep over it. And you should know that coming into the process. And we've done that. When we started Convercent, I think in the first year we hired about 80, 90 people probably in the first year, and we probably let 20 of them go in the first 60 days that they worked here. And they were all, and not only that, we stood up in front of the whole company and we're like, this person's no longer here anymore, we committed to you, we're going to be surrounded by A players, moving on. But what you do when you're that clear with everybody is everybody who's there knows that they're an A player. And so I make real good decisions when there's 4 partners in Nebbiolo. It's Barclay, Philip, and I, and then Chuck Boyle. I met Chuck Boyle at a Starbucks in January of 2012, and he was a partner in Nebbiolo 70 days later. And when I meet people, we just have gut feelings. And what we don't look at, interestingly, in that is the resume. I mean, we look at it, but if you went to this university versus that university, or an MBA versus that, just doesn't. Barclay and I don't have the prettiest of resumes. Philip went to Polytech University, which is the equivalent of a metro. And what we look for is hard work, enthusiasm, and you also have to be a good person. And this is something that Philip actually reminded us of just a couple days ago. You can be phenomenal at your job, and if you're an asshole, we will fire you. And we have proved that. We have done that time and time and again in our career. We let our #1 salesperson at Rivet go because he was not acting in a way that I would want my kids to work with him if I had kids, right? And so you have to be willing to do that. And when you do that, and are there times we maybe waited a month longer than we should have? Probably, but we've never waited 6 months too long. And so we make gut decisions, we fire fast. We're very clear with people why we do it, when we do it. We don't tell them it's, we're just very clear about that stuff.
Okay.
Do you have anything to add to that, or is that? No?
Sounds good. So that's like, if you're going to fail, fail fast? Kind of that same model?
Yeah, same. Yep.
Okay.
But cool. you also find amazing rock stars. We have two folks here in the company, and I don't think, Ryan, are you here? Is he up here?
He just stepped out.
Oh, did you just step out? So Ryan is, he did go to one of those awesome colleges. He went to Vanderbilt. He came here for an interview. Our lawyer, who's a friend of ours, said, hey, I got this Vandy kid, will you interview him? And so I said, sure, I'll give him 45 minutes. So he came in 5 minutes into the interview. I kid you not, 5 minutes into the interview, I was like, you're hired? He's like, for what? I was like, I don't know, you're hired. And we went over to Kara and we said, I need an offer letter. Like, before he leaves here, he needs an offer letter. Because my gut feeling was he had a couple other conversations lined up, and I didn't want anybody else to hire. At 5 minutes into the interview, we hire him. And he is an unmitigated rock star. I mean, the kid works, he's first in, he's last out. He's everything that people say about the millennial generation, he's everything not. He is phenomenal. And we actually have somebody else that's here right now who I'm going to embarrass a little bit in front of everybody, Lindsay. Lindsay, again, not someone who comes into a situation that had 10 years experience and all these other things. And Lindsay's here right now because she wanted to be at this, but she was here every night at 7 o'clock. And when we had to make a very tough decision to go through some layoffs. And when we went through layoffs, there was, you kind of look at, we had this many of these positions, we can only have this many. And bluntly, Lindsay was the least qualified on paper for that job. And there was no doubt in anybody's mind of that group who that first person was. And so you just make up decisions about people, and you take it and you move on. And you're right most of the time.
So when you get that gut feeling, what do you attribute that to? Would you attribute it to something that when you grew up, or maybe even that story that you told about at GW? Do you think it's part of that growing up, or just innate, or did you learn it, or how would you explain that? People talk about that a lot sometimes.
Yeah, I don't think you can learn to be an entrepreneur. I think you can educate yourself to be a better one. I also don't think you learn leadership. I think you either are or just like you can practice a certain sport every day for all of your life, and it doesn't mean you're ever going to be a pro, right? There are things that we are all naturally good at. I was raised in a military family. When I got that job when I became president of Delta Translation, so it would have been like 9 months after I graduated. I was a history major in college, and so it was my first month. And he said, "So here are the numbers," and he handed me 3 sheets of paper. And it was a monthly P&L, balance sheet, cash flow. I was like, "Oh, this is awesome! It's great." I was like, "So let me look at these. I'll get back to you tomorrow." And I literally went home. I didn't know what a balance sheet was. I had never looked. I didn't know what the word balance sheet was. So, I had to get smart quick, and I called my dad. I said, "Do you know an account?" I went over there. I was like, "What is this thing?" And he walked me through it. And so I think that this is what I'm supposed to do, and I'm really, really fortunate that I ended up doing what I'm supposed to do, because I certainly wasn't raised to do it. I was supposed to, I guess, be an Army officer or something. But yeah, I think that everybody's good at something, and you just gotta hope the hell you find it. So, but you can't get better at it. But either are a leader or you're not. Either are an entrepreneur. You can accept risk. I mean, I put 150 grand on my credit cards and I lost. So.
You're willing to take the bet.
We do use company credit cards.
So how do you monitor that risk when you go into something like that? Like take Convercent. You started it. How did you guys sit down and talk about? Well, I'll talk about, because it's part of that conversation, I'm assuming.
So here's the difference. At ServiceSelect, I don't even think we talked about risk. We just made decisions and went. And listen, had Lehman Brothers not collapsed, we would have run the largest. I do believe that. Like, we were in the wrong place at the wrong time. We would have successfully built that into a $30, $40 million company and sold it to somebody. Do you agree with that? Yeah. So when we were in Convercent, we had a funding deal on the table for $1.5 million. We had 4 weeks payroll in the bank. We had brought over, 10 people from Rivet. Told them, "Don't worry, everything's fine, come on over, it's great. You really want to do this." So we were going to get this money, which would have given us enough money to run for a while. And it was 2 days before closing in July of 2012. And the relationship with the investor got very uncomfortable. They tried to insert some stuff at the last minute. And there was kind of a mutual decision we were not going to do this. And we walked away. I think it was, we kind of broke up with each other, but we absolutely let that. Had we not broken up with each other, we would have broken up with that. But like, we had no other funders. We had nothing else. We had two payrolls in the bank. And we were able to get funding then in 17 days and move on. What was interesting is I was looking back is we made a decision, so that was July. We were in May. I was actually on a vacation with my brother in Italy. And I was sitting in a vineyard in Barolo in the middle of grapes on my cell phone because the phone didn't work.
The wine thing again, right?
The phone didn't work in the hotel. I was staying in this like castle. Anyway, it didn't work. So I had to like go up on the hill. So I'm literally sitting in the middle of, ironically, Nebbiolo grapes. We hadn't started Nebbiolo. No, we had. So I was sitting in the middle of a Nebbiolo grape. And I'm on the phone with Barclay and Philip and Chuck, and we're like, should we hire these people? But we actually had the conversation this time, which was totally different than the time before. And so we were hiring, it was Mike Brower and I think it was Greg Ebert.
Yeah, it was like, I think it was like 2 to 4 people.
Yeah, and kind of chunky salaries, and we're like, should we do this? And we walked through it like, well, we got this funding coming up, and we had a term sheet. And so we talked about it, and at the end of the day, we said, without Mike and Greg, we can never build this company. So we made the decision. And that was a lot of risk because we knew we didn't have 4 to 8 weeks payroll, but you got to believe in that there's an outcome there. And we knew, the economy was getting better, and we had a good reputation coming out of Rivet, and so, but it wasn't a good decision. But without it, we wouldn't be where we are now in the product and et cetera. So.
Okay. So when you go out to have these conversations with your investors, either today or previous investors, and they're talking about, because some of us have been there, some of us haven't, they ask a lot of questions in some cases, depending on the relationship you have with the investor. How do you explain that gut feel to them? Hey, I feel this is the right thing to do. How do you go about selling that to them?
You don't sell that to them. You know, but listen, they're investors. I mean, the guys, our lead A-round investor, Azure Capital, Cameron Lester. So there's 4 partners in Azure. And one of the things that we like about the team in Azure is those 4 guys came together in '99. They raised $500 million from high net worth individuals, almost all individuals rather than funds. They made their first investment in November of '99. So those of you who follow tech history kind of know where this story is going. They spent $300 million of the $500 million in about 9 months. And then the stock market went from 5,000, the NASDAQ went from 5,000 to 2,000 overnight. Those 4 gentlemen, there were only 4 then, and those 4 are still partners now, and they've been through 2 downturns. So that really spoke to us as we were looking at what investors were coming with. But listen, you don't have to have a risk discussion with someone who's spent, at that point, they've probably spent $800 million investing in companies. I mean, everybody in the room has sat and stared at that issue.
Right.
Face, so.
Right. Exactly. Okay.
I think what you do need to do when you go to an investor, anybody who's going to raise money, is you got to go in with a clear vision for the company and a clear vision, and I believe this more than even the first, a clear vision for the culture of that company. Because at the end of the day, what gets a company through this process is actually not the vision. And that's the biggest bucket of bullshit out there. What gets a company through this is the culture. Because other than a few companies we've all heard of that take off in a rocket ship, right? All the rest of them are just hard work. I mean, like mind-numbing hard work. And you're gonna have to probably lay some people off. You hope you don't, but you might. You're gonna have to miss your numbers. You hope you don't, but you will. I swear to you, you will miss your numbers. Because to get money, you put one number, you're not gonna hit the number, okay? And when you go through those things, guess what? The vision ain't enough, right? The vision is not gonna get you through a layoff. It's not gonna get you through missing your numbers. What gets you through those moments is your culture. One of the things I'm extraordinarily proud of is that we had to make a very, very, very tough decision here in January. And that decision was a very proactive decision. So we had just received a huge amount of funding in October. We're very fortunately in a great cash position. But we could see that our assumptions were drastically wrong. So I had 2 choices. I could take a risk and go to my board and say, here's the plan, and you gotta hit a crazy big number, and if you hit it, everybody's a hero. But if you miss, you're gonna have a gun to your head. And I've had that once in my career, and I wasn't gonna do that again. So we made a very early, very tough decision. And I think how we did it ethically and honestly. I stood up in front of the room and I was like, I fucked up. And this is what's gonna happen. Like, I fucked up and 30 of you are gonna pay the price. And that's how this works. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is 2 specific things. One is that not a single employee team member at Convercent today has left since that happened. Because usually in an environment like this, every one of those developers, every one of those folks in that organization can put their resumes out and leave and probably get a raise, right? Because you can get a raise, right? So I'm extraordinarily proud of that. And I'm thankful every day, and I try to make sure that all of our team members know how much they mean to this vision that we have. But it's the culture, not the vision, right? The other thing that I'm very proud of is that we host a lot of events here. And there's a really cool event called Creative Mornings, and for those of you who have never been, I would strongly recommend going. Creative Mornings is awesome. And it's once a month. And so we've hosted it here every month for like the last year. And since that layoff, there's probably 5 or 6 members of our company that are involved in Creative Mornings. And it just so happened most of those are unfortunately folks that we had to make this decision with. And they still come back. They still come to the events, and there's no awkwardness. Like, they come up here and we talk, and how you doing? And I bump into them when we're out and about, and I buy them a beer. And there's no anger, there's no frustration. There's a responsibility and that. But that's why when you go raise money, when you start a company, you start with a culture. And that culture is going to do the vision, because here's the thing you can do. You can change the vision. You know, Twitter was 3 things before it became this. There's lots of those companies that were multiple things before they became something. But it's the culture that gets them through that. It's the stories at Facebook about the guys jumping off the house into the swimming pool, blah, 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 blah. That's what gets you through those tough moments. And that's why I think one of the best things about the millennial generation coming up right now is I think it's the most values-based generation that we've had in a very long time. They have more sense of belief in causes than certainly my generation. Yeah, what are we, generation? What X? What are we? X. Certainly more than my generation, and I think much more so than the Boomer generation. And they really care about causes. They want to believe in what they're doing. And I think the technology industry has taken, if you look at all these companies in Silicon Valley, whether intentionally or unintentionally, they've done an amazing job of tapping into that. Because these companies that have been very successful have great cultures. And they're made up, by and large, of a lot of millennials. And they get them to buy into this hook, line, and sinker. But the thing is, if the culture's not real, if it's bullshit, they'll figure it out. They'll figure it out so fast. And when they figure it out, the whole house of cards just comes over. You know, and I'll give you Zynga as an example. They had a great vision, they had a great business model. They have a piece of shit culture. And that company, the only people that work at Zynga in California are people that can't get jobs anywhere else. And I dare anybody to argue with that. There isn't a single stellar rock star employee in that company. And that's the reason for it, is that it isn't the vision. Because guess what? If you get hired now, the stock price is low. It's the best time to get a job at Zynga. Your strike price is nothing. If you believe in the vision of the culture, you're going to make a lot of money, right? They should be good at video games. They did it once. But nobody's going to go work there because they don't have a culture. So anyway, that's what I really am passionate about.
I like that. I agree. Yep. Totally. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, so we're just going to take one question, maybe two.
We'll take two.
Two? Any questions? Yes, sir.
So there was a period between the time that you were at your lowest point, were doing the associate sales job, but then you kind of got an opportunity. And then from there you built a successful business. How long was that period?
So I got the job in January. I got the consulting gig in June. I became president in September. And so we did $250,000 in Q3 of that year. And we did $15 million 6 quarters later in the quarter. So it was one of those right place, right time, a lot of luck, a lot of luck.
How does that even happen? Luck in the right place at the right time, right? Another question, anyone? All right. Oh, yes.
So I'm currently at a company that I think we definitely have that stellar culture. I work at exactly Corporation.
Yep, no, it's a great company.
Yeah. So we're growing really rapidly. And do you think that it's harder to maintain that culture when you start to become more corporate, or do you think there's a way to maintain that culture when companies are growing?
Yeah, no, I'll give you examples. I mean, has anybody ever been on the Google campus? Has anybody stepped foot on it?
Yep.
Yeah, when you step foot on the Google campus, you know the answer to that question. It is absolutely possible to do it. I was surprised at Rivet. There were weeks we were onboarding 20, 30 people at a time. And I was as proud of the culture the day we left than as I was. And we had a really tough work culture at Rivet. We were involved in a business that was involved in the earnings. So during the earnings, 3 weeks a quarter, we would work 80 to 90 hours a week. Now, the good news is you knew when it was and you could look at a calendar and you're like, it's weeks 4, 5, 6 a quarter, right? But it was, I mean, you literally checked out of your family, checked out of your life. I mean, it was brutal. And it was everybody in the company. And even hiring as much as we did, you know, we had, once people made it past 100 days, we had almost no turnover, even going through those crazy things. So, you know, I think we did it growing fast. I was still very proud of the culture when we left. And yeah, if you've stepped onto the Google campus, you step onto the Apple campus. And those cultures are very different, you know. Google is an absolute meritocracy. Everybody in their position, anybody at director or above, is one of the very best people in the world at their job. Because if you aren't, you won't work at Google. But they still have a great culture. You know, Apple is an extraordinarily driven culture, very different than Google and how they do it. But you know, people just don't leave those places, and they leave because of the success, but they also leave because of what it is. You know, they just don't. People just don't leave. And I'll actually give you a whole nother example. I was a recruiter. I was a headhunter for a summer in college. And is anybody here from St. Louis? Anybody from Minneapolis?
One.
So you're going to get this. So my dad told me, it was my dad's company. It was a small little thing. So he said, when you're recruiting, he goes, when you call into somebody who lives in St. Louis or Minneapolis, always ask if they're from there or if their wife's from there. Always ask the question right away. I said, why? He goes, because they'll never fucking move. He goes, even if you're giving them a job in San Diego, they're not going to move. If they have decided to stay in those cities as an adult, they're married to somebody who lives in those cities, they're not going to leave. And I was like, Minneapolis? And I remember I called into the guy, and it was like January, so shit, snowing sideways. And the job was literally in San Diego. I was like, I don't need this guy to move. And I spent like 3 months, and he's like, oh, I think I want to do it, but I got to talk to my wife, and he was Minnesota nice, and
Minnesota nice.
he didn't take the job. It was like a $10,000 raise, and I was offering him the sun.
But he only stays 3 months out.
For any of you that have, you know, and you're from there, St. Louis and Minneapolis are cities that have an undeniable culture. I mean, Minneapolis is like unlike any other place, and it is Minnesota nice, and it is cold, and it is miserable, there's mosquitoes in the summer, it's hot. I don't know why people live there, with all due respect to them. But I tell you what, almost nobody leaves because they love the culture. And so that idea of culture isn't just companies, right? It's in more than those things.
Right.
So,
cool. Well, I really appreciate it.
Yep.
You showing up tonight and giving us some insight into your journey. Thank you for showing up tonight.
yep,
Appreciate
you're
it.
welcome. Thank you very much. everybody.
Patrick Quinlan, thank you. All right. Well, I was going to just wrap up here with, you know, we got our next month. We're going to be having another one. So our events are again about every second Thursday of the month. So go on the site and sign up and come. If you're interested in helping out with Startup Grind or have an inspirational speaker that you think would be awesome, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. So we have about another hour or so for networking and everything else. So if you don't have any questions or anything else right now, we'll just thank you so much for showing up.